This session, we are joined by three very distinguished scholars who, don't worry though, are going to help us think very practically. Right? So we're going to move from the abstract, or a little bit more abstract, to a bit more concrete. And so just so you have a sense of the kind of arc of this panel, or as we were talking about, the sort of full life cycle, we will begin with how does this work in high school, to how could this work in the university education, to how does this work in public service itself, right? And so just to think about, that will be the kind of the evolution of these comments. But let me say a little bit more about each speaker before we begin, who it's my great pleasure and honor to introduce. So first we have Deacon Christopher Roberts, who is distinguished for so many things, right? Including, I'll just name a few, was a reporter for Religion and Ethics Weekly. Is that right? Yes, okay. And then moved on to complete to the UK to complete his MA at the University of Oxford and PhD at the University of London in theology. And he would go on to do something quite ambitious, which was to build a classical Catholic high school in Philadelphia, who we have some of us here are proudly representing, right, from the product, Martin Saints Classical High School, which is a great feat, but still, in my estimation, not quite as important as his prior role, which was to serve as the inaugural theologian in residence for the Collegium Institute. So we're still very proud of that.
All downhill from there,
yeah. So next to Deacon Roberts is Professor Catherine Wilson, who is Associate Professor of the Department of Public Administration at Villanova University. And she is right now serving a sabbatical to continue her scholarship as a reward for her distinguished service just completed as chair of the Department of Public Administration, okay? Where she has been trying to educate the next generation of public servants within the university. She completed her MA at the school, the renowned School of Foreign Service at Georgetown University. But again, even more exciting than that is she did her PhD in political science here at the University of Pennsylvania, and has also, among her many distinguished publications, there's one that I'm particularly fond of that she published in the Journal for the Program for Research on Religion and Urban Civil Society, which I am privileged to direct. So next is Dr. Ángel Alvarado, who is a research scholar at the University of Pennsylvania in the Department of Economics, and is helping to spearhead the new initiative for Penn's initiative for the study of markets, particularly in Latin America, and actually I think co-hosts a podcast on the economics of Latin America, and has been featured in Penn today because of the way in which his scholarship also intersects with his own life of public service. And so I think we began today thinking about, things are really polarized, right? We have political issues in the United States. Well, where Dr. Alvarado is coming from in Venezuela, one could make an argument, right, that there is at least as much turmoil in Venezuela as well. And he served as congressman there, and has been targeted in many ways by the government, and somehow continues to try and practice these civic virtues in the face of these threats. I think is a real inspiration for those of us who might be thinking about a career in public service, even in a highly polarized world. How do we take these abstract principles and make them real for the common good? So that's the introduction for these three. So maybe to start us out, I'll turn to Deacon Roberts.
Okay. Thank you, Dan. Thank you so much for that. It's so much fun to be here. We're having a great day, and any Chile production is always a joy.
So before he begins, just to thank him for his remarks too, but I also, our great cameraman, Zach, told me that because we have so much life at this table, I should make a public service announcement that when we make an emphatic point, you should just resist slamming the table.
That's really hard. I have a lot of emphatic points.
So you can hit me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hold my hands.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay. Now,
No,
I am always so excited to be at a Collegium event, even on a rainy Saturday. So this is great. Thank you. I have been hanging around high schools and colleges for close to 30 years. So I do have a few observations that I'd like to offer about Catholic social teaching, Catholic social thought, CST for short. I have a few observations about how I've seen CST used well and badly in these contexts. However, the problem is that recently, as punishment for my sins, I've been made a school administrator. And so I'm exiled from the classroom. But as a matter of fortunately, one of my colleagues who teaches senior year theology at Martin Saints Classical High School, Ms. Lindmeyer, is here. And over there, Gabe Hallowell is one of her senior year students. So they're studying Catholic social teaching in real time right now in the classroom. So I'll say a few things that I've noticed, but then you'll make it real maybe at some point in the Q&A or whatever. Truly, what a joy to be here. Okay, I have seen Catholic social teaching, CST, used well, used ambivalently, and used badly. I'll start with the bad news or the ambivalent stuff, and I'll end with what I hope are two inspiring examples of how to do it well. Okay, Catholic social teaching can be a vehicle to get social justice topics into the curriculum, and it can be used as a rationale for service learning. And at public schools, prep schools, Quaker schools, on a good day, service learning is like motherhood and apple pie. Everybody's in favor of service learning. And why not? It makes sense. And Catholic social teaching can give Catholic high schools an extra, especially powerful motive for service learning and a context for discussing what service means. So amen to that. Integrated with a culture of promoting service, I also noticed over the years that CST, Catholic social teaching, can have an apologetic or bridge building function. Catholic educational administrators at Catholic colleges and high schools, sometimes we hold out Catholic social teaching on topics like social justice, the poor, immigration, labor, economics, war, peace. We take this body of work and we offer it to faculty and students who might not otherwise be sympathetic with our Catholic mission, but who can align with some of the political implications of CST. And it can be, on a good day, a strategy to bring certain people somewhat into the Catholic fold. Secular faculty and students who otherwise might not have much patience for Catholic identity can find kind of a toehold in Catholic culture. And this kind of coalition strategy, again, on a good day, it can be a very savvy missionary or evangelical strategy. a way of keeping people in conversation with the church. And a lot of individuals at different stages in their journey of faith, maybe for reasons X, Y, or Z, they're not sure where they're at, but Catholic social teaching is something they can relate to, and so done right, Catholic social teaching can be presented in a way that is the beginning of a journey. But I also worry that using our social teaching in this kind of apologetic, coalition-building way, I also worry that sometimes it can be a failure of courage, a way of reducing the faith to activism that dodges some of the harder issues and postpones the invitation to conversion. I worry that sometimes in this version of Catholic social teaching, we rely on a very exaggerated account of natural law, as if natural law is somehow anti-theological. Right? You often hear it said in discussions of Catholic social teaching that it's open to all rational people of goodwill, that it's not relying on a theological premise. And that is true to an extent, but there are actually theological reasons for that. And I worry that when we, I've seen school administrators, really lean hard into this in a way of avoiding theology. And I think that today's kind of the two concepts that Dr. Chile has invited us to consider today, freedom and justice, are really good examples of what can go wrong when you insufficiently theorize, when you are insufficiently philosophical about Catholic social teaching. Because the church uses words like freedom and justice in particular ways. And if we don't examine what we mean by freedom and justice at deep philosophical and theological levels, then we are going to lapse into using those words in this sort of popular, secular way. And we're going to think those words are neutral and obvious, and so we're going to drift away from authentic Catholic understandings. For example, and Fran kind of alluded to some of this morning, in American popular discourse, freedom typically means a libertarian style of freedom from constraint or just a naked individualism. But for Catholic social teaching, while freedom does contain an aspect of not being coerced, freedom more comprehensively means the conditions of life that enable virtue and worship. Likewise, justice in American popular discourse tends to mean getting what you deserve in a utilitarian context of maximizing happiness for the greatest number, or it might mean, justice might mean whatever consenting adults agree to in a contract. But in Catholic discourse, justice appeals to an eternal law to which we humans have duties and which we are not the authors of. Right? Justice has natural and supernatural obligations, giving God and his creatures an inalienable dignity. So, again, in Q&A, maybe we can go back to some of these definitions between the secular words and the Catholic words. But my point at the moment is to warn against a danger that I've seen on many campuses where we're tempted to treat CST in a very pragmatic way, and we just risk too much of our authentic Catholic identity without even realizing it. But here's the good news. The good news is that when we get CST right, with full philosophical and theological clarity, the results are truly generative and creative. Catholic social teaching is always based on, again, Fran alluded to this morning, a Catholic definition of what is a human being, what is a human person. And when we talk about Catholic anthropology, that means talking about the imago Dei, the image of God. And to talk about the imago Dei, you have to know who's God, right? So to talk about a Catholic human being, you've got to talk about God. And who is God? So God's the original. And God is Jesus. And Jesus takes us into the life of the Trinity. And the Trinity is an eternal communion of persons whose love is overspilling in creation and sacrifice and service. So authentic Catholic social teaching is constantly appealing to an account of human dignity based in this Trinitarian notion of God and love for one another and service. And when you're anchored there, that's when I think we can start to answer Dr. Chile's question. How do we move beyond polarization? Because I think this Catholic account of the human person is so creative and so much more profound than the boundaries of left and right that Dan wants us to to transcend. And I'll close with two examples of how I think that can work in practice. One from ancient times, one from modern times. In classical pagan societies, there was a pre-existing tradition of rich benefactors, prominent citizens who would subsidize public games, bathhouses, and doles of food, grain and pork in ancient Rome. But in the minds of both the givers and the receivers, the philanthropists and the beneficiaries, these gifts were from one citizen to another. The pagan elite might have helped the plebs, but the plebs received their benefactions on the basis of mutual citizenship in the empire. Plebs were entitled to their ration of food not because they were poor and needy, but because they were citizens. Oh, sorry, emphatic point near the microphone. There were many destitute non-citizens in ancient Rome who were completely left out of the cycle of charity. But in those first 2-3 centuries of Christianity, there was a new vision of what a human being was. Right? So a poor pleb who was not a citizen had no moral standing, no claim on a Roman patrician's conscience. But the early Christians came in with this idea of the image of God, that your dignity is premised not on your citizenship, but on being created by God. And they started giving charity not on the basis of citizenship, but on the basis of need. They started, the poor had a claim on your conscience, even if they weren't citizens. And this was huge, revolutionary in the West and therefore the world, because it created a category of people, the poor, to whom we had a charitable obligation. And that's what I mean when I say that the Imago Dei, authentic Catholic anthropology, is so generative, right? They went against common sense. They went against the natural law reasoning of the day, and they invented a category of persons with a moral claim upon us. And that's a huge deal. Second, final example. There is a week in January where at our school, Martin Saints, we try and make a big deal out of it. We got snowed out 2 days that week, so we didn't do it justice this year. But there's a week in January where it's Martin Luther King Day on the Monday and the March for Life in Washington on the Friday. And if there's any bishops watching this recording, I really, really hope that the USCCB, I don't understand why the National Catholic Church doesn't lean hard into this week, because you've got Martin Luther King Day on the Monday, and you've got King's body of work, his writings on human dignity, his explanation, why is racism wrong? And he appeals to the image of God, the Imago Dei, and that we're all creatures of this same God. And he's appealing to our natural law sources, Aquinas, Augustine, St. Paul. And then, so the reasons that King was right, the reasons that racism is wrong on Monday of this week in January, and the reason that we march for life in Washington on the Friday, the reason that we're pro-life, the reason that we respect and love and cherish and protect the unborn are the same reasons, right? And that's, again, this is what I mean when I say that the Imago Dei, the Catholic account of the human person, is generative and creative. Because in a divided country and in a divided church where people want you to choose between social justice, are you a Dr. King Christian? And pro-life, are you a pro-life Christian? No, the correct Catholic answer is both. The correct Catholic answer is to be neither left nor right, just fully and authentically committed to Catholic. And so I really believe that an authentic Catholic understanding of the human person is fundamental to getting Catholic social teaching right, that every aspect of CST, we could go on for another dozen examples, it always appeals to this anthropology. And I'll say in closing that sometimes you see coming from Rome today, and this discourse as if we have to update our anthropology or change our anthropology. And I just say, no, the classic Catholic Orthodox anthropology is just creative, generative, and indeed a call to repentance. Catholic social teaching is a call to repentance. And so it always needs to keep that theological church locus in mind. Thank you.
Thank you.
So it's a delight to be here with you today, also with a former colleague of mine from Villanova, and also to be back here at Penn and to be with a new panelist, a new colleague of mine. Thank you so much, Dan and Joe, for the invitation for today. And I think Joe's going to forward the slides. I have some accompanying slides for you today. Hopefully these images will be beneficial to the conversation. So what I'd like to do today is to discuss how a concern for the common good and also discovering and living out one's vocation can help provide a bridge to the freedom-justice divide taking place in public life, whereby we often feel forced to falsely choose between individual freedom and social justice. And so the argument is that what can really bridge those divides is this concern for the common good, which is part and parcel of what Catholic social teaching is about, and then also finding and discovering and living out your vocation to serve and to lead. So if you could forward to the next slide. So last summer, I traveled with some family members to St. Paul, Minnesota. You probably won't be able to see these images too much, but I'll explain them. We stopped into the Cathedral of St. Paul, which sits on top of Summit Hill. And I was struck by some beautiful mosaics. Those are all mosaics that adorn the interior dome of the cathedral, which portrayed the virtues of temperance, prudence, justice, and fortitude, the natural cardinal virtues, as we call them. And I noticed that the virtues were represented by angels and accompanied by typical symbols. Temperance is moderately pouring a substance from one receptacle to another. Justice is carrying a sword and holding a scale. And fortitude is adorned with armor and carries a tree branch. The mosaic of prudence, if you can forward to the next one, I became captivated and also puzzled. I should also admit that I'm not a Renaissance scholar. So my field is public service, political science, and I thought to myself, why is prudence looking into a mirror and holding a snake? It's kind of interesting. And I really was puzzled by this. So of course you have to do some research to figure out why this is. So through some research, I came to understand that the virtue of prudence has been portrayed in a range of ways over the years. The mirror representing self-knowledge and the snake exemplifying wisdom. And you can trace this rendering of wisdom as a snake to the Gospel of Matthew 10:16, where Jesus, after commissioning the apostles, states, "Behold, I am sending you like sheep in the midst of wolves. So be shrewd as serpents and simple as doves." In reflecting on this, I realized that this portrayal of prudence challenges what we have come to think about this virtue as halting or overly cautious. Instead, this image of prudence projects being astute and confident in one's own skin. Prudence is not flinching, for instance, as she holds the snake in her hand. I also realized that it's appropriate that temperance, prudence, justice, and fortitude were designed in mosaic form, as there are many pieces involved in the cultivation, practice, and refinement of virtue. The practice of virtue is not meant to be a solitary, independent act. In the dialogue, Catherine of Siena writes that, quote, "every virtue is realized through your neighbors," end quote. She means the desire to love one's neighbors stems from an intimate experience of being loved by God, and thus desiring to love others with that similar love. This is how I would connect Catherine of Siena's writings to the image of prudence. When a person peers into the mirror of self-knowledge, that person experiences being seen, known, and loved by God, and more fundamentally, as being made in the image and likeness of God, or as Chris mentioned, the Imago Dei. This experience, coupled with the charge of wisdom, allows us to have confidence to exercise prudence as we make decisions and reach out to family members, neighbors, and the larger community in acts of loving service. Next slide, please. At this point, I'd like to provide a definition of the common good as articulated in a document from the Second Vatican Council, Gaudium et Spes. The document states that the common good is the sum of those conditions of social life which allow social groups and their individual members relatively thorough and ready access to their own fulfillment. Note that this definition does not falsely set the individual against the social order, but recognizes the interdependent link between the individual and the larger community in desiring their mutual flourishing. Next slide, please. So how could a concern for the common good be embedded in undergraduate or graduate degree programs? I'd like to provide the example of Villanova's Master of Public Administration program. And as Dr. Chaley mentioned, I served as chair of the Department of Public Administration at Villanova for close to a decade, now coming off of that. But all of this is from experience in being an administrator and also a faculty member in that department. So first and foremost, just to set up what our department is about, we argue that our mission is to form ethical, intelligent, creative, and inclusive leaders in the field of public service. And how is this accomplished? Through its 4 goals: exposure to practical experience, making connections between theory and practice, understanding the role that values play in the decision-making process, and an emphasis on service and the common good. Next slide. I always provide this slide to prospective students, showing them just how expansive the field of public service is. We always say in our department that public service involves the public, private, and nonprofit sectors, but there is a role for the private sector to play in public service as well. Note that this is not an exhaustive list of opportunities in the field. So for instance, we have here corporate social responsibility under the private sector. We have military service, working in townships, cities, and boroughs under the public sector. And then also social service organizations, hospitals, higher ed under the nonprofit sector. And what's really fascinating about the work that we do in public service and facilitating the educational experience for students is that students are coming into the program with a particular idea that they want to be in a sector. But within that sector, there's a multitude of opportunities. And I have dashed lines in between the sectors here because we often find that many of our master's students, once they've worked in one sector, want to move to another sector. And so some of the skills and tools and techniques that we teach, we argue should be transferable. So one can view this as a landscape in which each opportunity can be viewed as a piece of a larger mosaic, similar to the mosaics that we talked about in the beginning, in that each opportunity makes significant and important contributions to the overall field. And I would say what is most gratifying about being an educator in this field is watching students and how they their impact in the field of public service as they live out their own vocations to serve in this dynamic field. And when one discovers their authentic vocation in public service, that serves as an example for others. So next slide, please. So how is a concern for the common good and a consideration of one's vocation to public service demonstrated in our undergraduate and graduate programs? So as I mentioned, we have a Master of Public Administration degree. We also just established an undergrad degree last year in Public Service and Administration, which is really exciting. A couple of ways that I would like to briefly discuss is curriculum and programming. All of our classes, whether they're undergraduate or graduate classes, are oriented to how people can manage others, individuals, and resources to serve public purposes. So essentially you have classes on human capital management, but you also have classes on financial management. So understanding why people are motivated to serve in the field, but then also knowing how to read and be financially literate. We also, for our undergraduates, have a capstone course called the Vocation of Public Service. And in that course, students actually have to develop a plan to map out their own professional vocation in the field. We also invite speakers who serve as role models to come and visit our classes or headline events. These could be speakers who work in economic development, healthcare management, consulting, you name it. Another way that I think a concern for the common good and understanding one's vocation is made evident in our program is through required internships. For our undergraduate degree and for our master's degree, we require internships. The idea is to gain practical experience in larger professional networks. We've placed students in local government, we've placed students in arts and culture organizations, in emergency management agencies. the FBI. This way, the students can get a sense as to what sector or subfield interests them. Another area is teaching and service. What's really fascinating about this realm is that here faculty members can put their own spin on how they'd like to teach, what they'd like to research, how they'd like to serve the university, their community, and their profession. And it's really interesting, again, because the field of public service is so expansive, to see all the different ways in which, and all the different types and examples, how that can look. In my own class, Effective Nonprofit Management, I have students conduct a community engaged project where they work in teams throughout the course of a semester. I partner them with a nonprofit organization, and they adopt the role as a consultant, and they need to, for instance, do a project on a board development project or a marketing and communications plan for a nonprofit. And in so doing this, they see up close the important role that nonprofit organizations are playing at the local level, and they provide recommendations to them. They get so excited when the organization actually adopts their recommendations, and that's really a treat to actually see full circle what graduate students can do and how that can make an impact in the life of an organization. And then the other thing I do to really drive home a belief in the common good and one's vocation is I take students always on field trips. Whether you're an undergraduate student or a graduate student, you're going to go somewhere every single semester. You're going to go on a mural arts walking tour, you're going to go to a naturalization ceremony, you're going to go to one of the natural lands, Stoneleigh, for instance, just to see how organizations operate, what's around you, what are the community organizations that are building the infrastructure of your life. And then finally, advising and mentoring. Here, I think that it's so gratifying to, again, follow the journeys of our students, but to also understand that each student has their own story, and to tap into those stories and see how those stories connect to the areas where they best want to serve. I think it's so important to realize that no experience is wasted, whether that's summer work, whether that's being an athlete, whether that's your own experience about coming from a different town and moving into a new place, or being an international student. All of those experiences shape who we are. And I think in this realm, we realize that higher education is not about just delivering and receiving content. It's about accompanying students and alumni on their personal and professional journeys. Here, I think it's important to drive home the importance of knowing how to fail and being okay with failing, but also knowing how to respond when you make a mistake or a misstep. And so, myself included, instead of asking the question, why did I do that? I turn the question around on myself and students. How could I or you have done that differently? How can we take this experience and move it in a different direction? So I'm going to close with this slide. In closing, I want to return to the image of prudence. This is a different rendition. This was painted by Renaissance artist Piero del Pollaiolo, I think I said it the right way, in the 15th century, and hangs in the Uffizi Gallery in Florence. This image, I think, can assist us in connecting not only our students' vocations, but also ours to the common good. We think about the mirror of self-knowledge. How do we come to understand our meaning and purpose as made in the image and likeness of God? In that understanding, this enables us to take an inventory of our values, gifts, talents, and life experiences. This inventory assists us in freely pursuing our vocations to serve and lead in a range of distinct and complementary ways. And then wisdom, represented by the snake, is the realm of discernment and decision-making as we carefully consider our next steps, who to consult, what kind of mentors we want to have around us, and exactly when to act. So I'd like us all to consider the following questions as we reflect on the image of prudence. What mirror or mirrors are we looking into, and what are they reflecting back to us? Are they showing us authentic or distorted versions of ourselves. Second, if we have spent time gazing or even glancing into the mirror of self-knowledge, what are some of the things we have learned? Third, what kinds of friends, mentors, and collaborators are we surrounding ourselves with to assist us in our life and vocational journeys? And fourth, at this point in time, how can we begin to see how our individual life experiences and stories can contribute to furthering the common good? How are we seeing the link between all the things that have shaped us and how that can be offered in service to those around us, whether our neighbors, our family, our larger community? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much, Dan and Joe, for the invitation. I'm going to give you some anecdotes, concrete examples on how to apply that civic virtues, cardinal virtues, in public office. One day I was very happy at home after breakfast and received a text message from the secretary of the chamber. He's the guy who checks all the laws and the resolution that the chamber is going to vote every day, every session. And he texts me, "Are you going to vote this?" So I opened the file and say, "Let me see this." Okay, it's about Pride Month, and the resolution basically is to open the door for same-sex marriage in my country. So I'm going to say, I'm not going to vote this, you know that I'm not going to vote this. Yeah, but nobody said nothing about that. The secretary of the chamber knows very well how do I vote historically. So I contact another member of my party and said, "Did you see this?" He said, "I didn't see that, Look at the number, I don't know, number 5. Oh, yes, it's open the door for the same-sex marriage. In the sense that in the constitution of my country, Venezuela, the marriage is between a man and a woman. It's clear, explicitly. And the resolution basically said, we're going to adapt the definition of marriage according to the UN resolution, blah, blah, blah. So, well, yeah, I'm alone here. I'm not going to vote this. So I'm going to see what my party want to do. So I contact the leader of my party, and he said, "No, I'm not going to vote that, but, the party is not in this, working on this at this moment. So, okay, let's talk with the leader of the party. So what to do about this, And I said, look, I'm not going to vote this, that I'm not going to vote this, and I have another vote. So we are not going to vote on this. He said, look, the world is moving in this direction, we cannot stop this because, everybody's in favor of this, the public opinion. So yeah, but what do you think? I asked him, what do you think? No, I'm against that, I believe in, the Catholic definition of marriage. So, okay, I'm going to make you a proposal. So, okay, let's do this. This is a coalition. We have 30 votes. We need 75 votes. So at that moment, we're 2, me, another 1, and 3. So let's do a resolution for the party. So what the party believe about this? So I changed, the Pride Month, no discrimination, respect the human, dignity of everyone. But, we need to have a right definition of the marriage according to the constitution of our country. I changed that, not according to the UN, according to the constitution of Venezuela. And I sent that proposal to the leader of my party. I said, it's okay, I'm going to send that to these guys. So while I was waiting for the response of the coalition are like 100 guys, I need just 40 votes, I need 75 votes. So the coalition, I was waiting for a response that's not possible. Let's make a negotiation here. What do you want? What do I need? And find a common ground. So this is the first time I talk about this in public. So, my party, nobody checked that. That was, like 30 minutes before the assembly, just 30 minutes. We don't have time to act. So they didn't. They checked the resolution and they didn't read the whole thing. So they said, my party said, it's okay. Okay, we have 30 votes. And then we sent that to the table with the 4 main parties, and they said, it's okay. Okay, so we went to the assembly, and the people voted that resolution. And after the secretary read it, some pressure groups realized, that everybody votes for a marriage according to the Constitution. That means men and women. That's it. How do you vote that? I said, what's that I believe, But how do you vote that for other people, Well, you have to read what you're going to vote, right? You didn't read it, it's your problem. But I read it, and I changed, according to my conscience. That's all. So it was a big scandal in the country, because in 2019 or 2020, how someone is voting for this. And I have 2 conclusions of this to you. The first thing, and I think it's the most difficult one, is to obey your conscience. That's very difficult. Because for me, maybe it would be very easier to stay at home and say, I'm not going to go that day to the assembly. So if I don't go, I don't vote for that. It's a way, to just to look to other place. But my conscience said, you are there to vote for that, in favor or against. But that's the mandate that I received from my constituencies, from the people that trust in me. And in fact, it's my vocation. I'm there, so I have to open my mouth and say something about it. So that's very difficult to act. And that requires fortitude. That virtue is very important. Because sometimes we know what is right and what is not. In this case, it's very clear, What I believe is clear. But to act is difficult. And that happened to many people. They prefer to say nothing. They prefer to be an anonymous person. And my exercise all the time is to obey my conscience. That's the most difficult thing, in my opinion, at least in my experience, as a politician, as a person that spent 10 years in office, 1 term in Congress. And sometimes it's very easy. The problem is what we are afraid of act. Because it's comfortable, to do nothing. But to act is difficult. But when you act, you realize that it's not so difficult as you believe it is. So my first recommendation is to act, to be intrepid. And as a politician, what you want is more power. And when you act, you are powerful. It's something that I learned. You have to act because everybody wants to negotiate with you. And the only thing that I have at that moment was my conscience and my words. Just that. Just one vote. In fact, just one conscience. And you can change reality when you follow what you believe and act according to that. So that happened to me, and I realized that sometimes we are afraid of act. And all the time, in my conscience, I listen the words of John Paul II, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Coming from a communist socialist country, of course, listen to that from John Paul II, we understand each other what he's trying to say to countries like this. Don't be afraid. But that happened for democracies, and that happened to Catholics in many other countries, that they didn't act. They are not intrepid people. They are not practicing fortitude. Maybe they are faithful people, practice charity, all the virtues, but you need fortitude. You need to act. You need to do something. And then you realize how powerful you are and how many things you can do for your country or for what you believe, for ideas that you are serving. Another anecdote, just to give you more examples. This is more complex, because I used to sit at the finance committee, budget committee. So I do economics, finance, banking, and other stuff. And I was saying that multilateral bank was altering the books. The balance sheet was incorrect. There were changing debt or default debts, complex thing. It's very complex. I don't want to go to details, but believe me that was wrong. And I had many meetings with the president of that bank, multilateral bank, saying, look, this is incorrect. This is not right. What are you doing? You are altering your books. You are giving a loan with a country that cannot capacity to repay the loan just to have a very nice balance sheet, doing a makeup of your balance sheet. I repeating that many times. I wrote a letter, And one day, that bank decided to send or give to Venezuela a loan that were not possible because the country is not paying the loans. You are making more and more makeup. That's the thing. Nobody understand that. I was alone on that. And that day, I sit down in my chair in Congress, and the leader of my party came to me and said, okay, guy, you are alone, just you. Okay, I'm going to vote against that, Okay, so typically you sit down, it's like a classroom waiting for all the students to start the sessions. The session is not, sharp, sometimes it's 10, but they start at 10:30, waiting for the people, waiting for, So at 10, I was there alone. He said to me, you are alone. The party doesn't know what to do. So you are alone at this moment. Okay, perfect. I was obeying my conscience. And suddenly, a congresswoman that sit down behind me said to me, okay, you have another vote. Okay, we are 2. 5 minutes after that, she said to me, I find 5 more, a small party. Okay, great, we are 6. That's very nice, I'm not alone here. We need 75 votes, okay? Okay. Okay, perfect. Suddenly, in my party, so the loan will go to a big state. Imagine a state like California, with many, many congressmen. So all the congressmen of that party, of that state, will vote for that loan because they want that money, of course. So I have opposition inside my party. So my party is very big there, so I have like 10 guys against me at that moment, okay? The whole coalition inside that state. And all the members of that state, the guys who represent that state were against me at that moment. Okay, and it was very clear that I was against that, okay? So the leader who was promoting that loan realized that I sent not secret, a private letter to the president of the multilateral bank explaining why everything that he made was wrong. Was a private communication between me and the president of that bank, and that guy that was promoting the law had that letter. So he said to me, okay, I have the letter. Okay, so he understands that I can leak the letter to the press. So he doesn't want to face the press, the public opinion. So the leader of my party said, well, the party want to vote with you. Okay, now we are 40. We need 30 more. But the thing is that I was open to go to the press and said, explain the situation. And nobody knows the situation better than me because I was following that case for so long. Suddenly, the leader of my party came to me and said, look, the coalition not gonna vote that. They're afraid of you, basically. I say, okay. I was 37, at that moment. I was not a very, conspicuous congressman. But I was, I was trying to obey my conscience. You can think that I'm very, I have a lot of fortitude. I'm not. I was afraid. I was afraid of public opinion. I was afraid of my party. I was afraid of my constituencies. I was afraid of my coalition. I was afraid of everyone because I was alone. Don't think that you are very, powerful guy. No, I'm not. In fact, I'm alone all the time. I felt alone all the time in that moment. Me and my conscience, just that. So I think that finally, the law didn't pass, and everybody, the dinner after that, one party with all the congressmen that we had, one guy said to me, "You are the leader of your party," But said that to me, with not praising me, like you are the leader, you are the problem here. So the thing here is like I've been studying all the virtues for so long. When I was 15, I was, the cardinal virtues, very clear. Read Aristotle's, Aquinas, the whole thing, very clear. I understand the virtues, but to apply the virtues is so difficult in public office. Very difficult, especially when you are under pressure. I was afraid. I can listen to John Paul II, don't be afraid. Okay, don't be afraid, but be there, it's so difficult. And I think sometimes what politicians need is philosophy, of course, Aquinas, but Aristotle, but literature sometimes is more powerful. A guy like Shakespeare is amazing as a politician because they interpret the soul, what really happened at that moment, because that's a tragedy. It's a tragedy and a comedy, it's the same. But that's the real life. And sometimes the problem is that we interpret our life as a tragedy, but life is a comedy in reality. In fact. So you need to have fun doing that. So what I learned is that sometimes for me it was a tragedy alone there. But then I realized this is a comedy. I'm an actor here, just a player. And this is a stage. That's not so, we need to have fun. Don't be so serious about it. So you have to change the world. You have to have fun changing the world. You have to obey your conscience, but not as a tragedy, as a comedy. Sometimes you need to be like an actor that increase the voice, using a mask like the Greeks, You're very small, but you need that mask to project your voice like you were many. So that's life. And I think that is for that reason, I think in the social Catholic teaching is very important. Theology, Aristotle is very important, but at the same time, you need literature. You need art to practice virtues. Because at the end, if you see just philosophy or theology, you see just a tragedy. And sometimes we need much more comedy. Thank you.